Hello, I'm Emma Chin, and I'm here to share the story of how my brother came to understand that while money isn't everything, it certainly brings some costly lessons. For the past 2 years, my brother Thomas had been calling my husband a poor immigrant and labeling me a desperate gold digger. But last night, he finally discovered just who he'd been insulting all along. Let me backtrack a little to explain. I grew up in the prestigious Parker family, where wealth and social standing were the ultimate measures of success. My older brother, Thomas, was the golden child. He went to Harvard Business School, took over our father's company by 30, and married a high society woman from the right family. I, on the other hand, took a different route. While Thomas chased after money, I chased after my dreams. I became a kindergarten teacher, much to the dismay of my family. A Parker teaching children who aren't even ours. Thomas would mock. How charitable. The sarcasm in his voice was impossible to miss. Then I met Wai Chen in a little coffee shop near my school. He was quiet, humble, and spoke with a slight accent that Thomas would later ridicule endlessly. Wai told me he worked in tech investments and lived in a modest apartment. But what truly drew me to him wasn't his wealth or status. It was his kindness, his sharp mind, and the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about transforming the world through innovation. When we got married 6 months later, Thomas was livid. He's obviously after the Parker money, he declared loudly at our modest wedding so everyone could hear. I give it a year before he shows his true colors. What Thomas didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Wai had insisted on a prenuptial agreement, not to protect himself, but to prove to me that he wasn't after my family's fortune. I thought it was unnecessarily sweet, but in hindsight, it became all too fitting. We spent 2 years living happily, while Thomas became more fixated on uncovering Wai's supposed hidden agenda. He hired private investigators, sure that Wai was hiding something shady. In a way, he was right. Wai was hiding something, just not what Thomas thought. You see, my unassuming husband wasn't just a tech investor. Wai Chen was the secretive founder of Future Horizon Technologies, a company that had revolutionized quantum computing. His humble apartment was one of over 30 properties he owned worldwide. His net worth made my family's fortune look small in comparison. But Wai preferred to keep his success low-key. Money talks, he would say with a grin. But wealth whispers. So we lived simply while Thomas continued his campaign to save me from what he believed was a gold-digging mistake. Things reached a boiling point last night at Thomas's annual Future of Business Gala. He invited Silicon Valley's elite, planning to announce a major expansion for Parker Industries. He also invited Wai and me, though not out of goodwill. He had a plan to expose my husband once and for all. Come on, Wai, Thomas said loudly as we entered his mansion. Time to stop pretending. How much do you need to leave my sister and vanish? Everyone knows you're after our money. Name your price. He pulled out his checkbook right there in front of everyone. He thought it would be a power move. If only he knew that across town, Wai's company was finalizing the purchase of an iconic Silicon Valley property. One that would make the morning headlines and change everything. The gala was in full swing, the chandeliers sparkling above the glittering guests of Silicon Valley, as Thomas kept up his act. He positioned us at the center of his grand ballroom for maximum drama, preparing to make his generous offer to my gold-digging husband. $1 million, Thomas announced, scribbling the amount on the check with a flourish. That should be more than enough for you to start a new life elsewhere. The crowd around us whispered, some looking uncomfortable, others eagerly awaiting the drama. Wai stood there, calm and composed, with his hands in the pockets of his simple yet perfectly tailored suit. I squeezed his arm, knowing how much he disliked being the center of attention. But before we could even respond, Thomas's wife, Victoria, chimed in. Really, Thomas, darling? Why not make it $2 million? She smiled maliciously. After all, we want to be generous with the help. She eyed Wai with barely concealed contempt. My face flushed with anger, but Wai simply gave a small, knowing smile that I had come to recognize as the calm before the storm. Mr. Parker, Wai said softly, his accent thicker under pressure, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Oh, now you want privacy? Thomas laughed, afraid to admit you've been exposed. Everyone knows you're nothing but a voice cut through the tension. An older man in an expensive suit rushed over, flustered. I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but is it true? The rumors about Tomorrow Plaza? Thomas frowned. Who are you? James Morrison, Silicon Valley Business Journal. The man introduced himself quickly, but his eyes were fixed on Wei. Sir, our sources say Future Horizon just acquired the Google headquarters complex for $12.5 billion. Is that true? Thomas's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Wei sighed, as the news wasn't supposed to go public until the morning. The room erupted into whispers. I watched as realization began to sink in for Thomas. His hand, still holding the unfinished check, began to tremble. Future Horizon, he whispered. But that's your Wei Chen. Yes, Wei confirmed quietly. I prefer to stay out of the spotlight, but since you're so concerned about finances. He pulled out his phone, dialed quickly in Mandarin, and waited. Within moments, every phone in the ballroom buzzed. The official press release had gone live. Future Horizon Technologies had acquired the iconic Silicon Valley campus in a record-breaking $12.5 billion deal. Victoria stumbled back, her perfect makeup unable to hide the shock on her face. As guests scrambled to Google my husband's name, more details came to light. Future Horizon's breakthroughs in quantum computing, their AI patents, their market value over $200 billion, and at the heart of it all, their enigmatic founder, Wei Chen. Thomas stood frozen, the check still clutched in his hand. His entire fortune wouldn't even cover one floor of the building Wei had just purchased. I think, Wei said gently, taking the checkbook from Thomas's trembling fingers, we can tear this up now. He did so slowly, letting the pieces fall next to the broken champagne glass. Though I appreciate the offer. The room was silent, save for the sound of the check tearing. Then James Morrison spoke again. Mr. Chen, would you care to comment on the rumors about Future Horizon's Mars colonization project with NASA? Wei smiled slightly. Perhaps we should save that discussion for another time. He turned to me with an apologetic smile. I'm sorry, dear. I know we were planning to announce that at Christmas. I couldn't help but chuckle at the sheer absurdity of it all. My immigrant husband, once considered nothing, was now acquiring Silicon Valley landmarks and apparently preparing for space missions. Thomas stood swaying, looking like he might pass out. His big move had failed spectacularly, and his meticulously planned party had morphed into my husband's impromptu press conference. But it wasn't over yet, because that's when my father made his entrance, fashionably late, oblivious to the fact that his son had just tried to bribe the wealthiest person in the room to walk away from his own daughter. My father, Robert Parker, strode into the ballroom with his usual commanding aura, instantly noticing the eerie silence and the scattered glass at Thomas's feet. What's going on here? He demanded, glancing between Thomas's ashen face and Wei's calm demeanor. Thomas, why does it look like you've seen a ghost? James Morrison, the journalist, eagerly jumped in. Mr. Parker, can you comment on your son-in-law's acquisition of the Google campus? It must be exciting to have the founder of Future Horizon Technologies in the family. My father froze mid-step. Future Horizon? His gaze locked onto Wei, perhaps finally seeing him for the first time in 2 years. You're that Wei Chen. Hello, father, I said, my tone a little sharper than I intended. Remember when you said I was wasting my life marrying a broke foreigner? Well, funny story about that. The next few minutes were utter chaos as father pieced things together. His face shifted from confusion to shock, and then settled into a strange mix of horror and calculation. I knew that expression. He was already thinking about business opportunities. Why, he said, smoothly switching into his CEO mode, son, if I'd known. Please, Wei interjected politely but firmly. Let's be honest here. For the last 2 years, you and Thomas treated your daughter, my wife, as though she'd made a huge mistake. You mocked her career, belittled her choices, and just tonight, you tried to bribe me to walk away from her. Father turned a furious glare toward Thomas. You did what? Oh, you should have seen it, father, I added sweetly. Thomas offered me a cool $1 million. He even wrote out the check, but I'm afraid it's in pieces on the floor now, alongside his champagne glass, and, well, his dignity. Victoria, usually quiet, suddenly burst out. But you live in that tiny apartment. You wear off-the-rack suits. You drive a Honda. Wei smiled. I prefer a simple life. Success doesn't need to change who you are. He turned to Thomas. Though I did make one rather extravagant purchase recently, the building across from Parker Industries. I bought it last week. Thought it would be a nice Christmas gift for Emma. She's always wanted to start her own progressive elementary school. Thomas made a strangled noise. The building he'd been trying to acquire for years to expand his company, the one he planned to announce tonight, was now going to be my school. But, Thomas stammered, that deal was nearly finalized with Crown Property. Yes, Wayne nodded. Crown Properties is one of Future Horizons' subsidiaries. In fact, many of your recent business deals have been with my companies through various shells and holdings. I keep track of my family's investments. The irony was almost too sweet. All those times Thomas had boasted about his business savvy, but he'd actually been negotiating with Y's companies, often getting better terms because Y had quietly ensured he got favorable deals. Father, ever the businessman, tried to salvage the situation. Perhaps we should discuss potential collaborations. Actually, I cut in. Y and I have an early flight tomorrow. We're off to Cape Canaveral to review the Mars mission protocols. I paused for effect. Though I guess we could stay a bit longer. Don't you want to discuss that other matter? Wayne nodded, his expression turning serious. Yes, Mr. Parker, Thomas. In light of recent events, Future Horizon will be reviewing all existing contracts with Parker Industries. While I've previously ensured you received favorable terms out of respect for family ties, I believe it's time for more market-driven arrangements. The color drained from both their faces. They knew as well as I did that market-driven arrangements could either make or break their company. You can't do that, Thomas shouted. Actually, Weiss said calmly, as a majority shareholder in several key subsidiaries you work with, I absolutely can. But don't worry, I'm not out for revenge. I just have two requests. First, Emma's school project gets your full backing. Second, his voice grew firmer, you finally treat your daughter with the respect she deserves. Father nodded quickly. Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but a sharp elbow from Victoria silenced him. As Wei and I left the party, I could hear the whispers behind us. The mysterious tech billionaire and the kindergarten teacher. The humble immigrant who quietly built an empire while his in-laws mocked him. You know, I said as we climbed into his Honda Civic, yes, he still insisted on driving it. You could have told them at any time. Saved us 2 years of their condescension. Weiss smiled, that same warm smile that had first drawn me to him in the coffee shop. Would it have made them better people? Sometimes people need to show who they really are before they can change who they could become. 6 months later, my school opened its doors. Thomas and Father attended the ceremony, notably humbled. Victoria even volunteered to help with fundraising, though I suspect she's still grappling with the fact that her former poor brother-in-law is now the primary investor in her favorite luxury brands. As for Wei, he still drives his Honda, still wears simple suits, and still prefers our cozy apartment over any mansion. But now, when we visit my family, there's a new respect in their eyes. Not for his wealth, but for his character. And me, I'm still teaching kindergarten, but now it's in my own school. Sometimes, when I work late, I glance out my office window at the lit-up Parker Industries building across the street and smile, remembering Thomas's face when he realized who truly owned the neighboring building. They say money talks, but as Wei showed me, integrity whispers. And sometimes, the quietest voice in the room belongs to the most powerful person in it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Stay stunned.